Happy October 1st, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our Hacktoberfest kickoff. We're going to talk a little bit about Hacktoberfest, how it got started, what it is, why we at Refactor are so passionate about it. We're going to talk a little bit about open source, which is at the heart of Hacktoberfest. And then we're going to give you a few ways that you can get involved and stay involved. So a little bit about me. My name is Erica Stanley. I'm a director of engineering at Google Play. I'm also the Atlanta site lead for Google Play, and I lead the apps growth and engagement teams there. I'm also a Refactor Tech organizer, where I work really closely with my favorite partners in crime, Angel Banks and Beth Lang. So we are celebrating Hacktoberfest. This is a way to celebrate all of the work that goes into open source software and the communities that support it, and do this in a really global, inclusive way. So what are some of the things you might want to know if you're looking to get involved with Hacktoberfest and with open source? So getting started with Hacktoberfest. First of all, anyone in the global community can be a part of this. It is a welcoming event to everyone in the global community. You want to make sure that to achieve the prize at the end, that you are making 4 pull requests to any GitHub or GitLab hosted project that is participating in Hacktoberfest. And you want to make sure that you're doing this, first of all, that you can register. You have to do that first for your pull request to count. And you can do that anytime between September 23rd and October 31st, but only your pull request between October 1st and October 31st will count. I'm old enough to remember when you could only register October 1st. And so it's really cool to see that you can register ahead of time and kind of prepare in Preptember and take that into Hacktober. So a few ways to get started. First, you want to, again, register with your GitHub or GitLab credentials at hacktoberfest.com. If you don't have a GitHub or GitLab account, no worries. You can create one for free at both sites. Now, you're interested in Hacktoberfest. You have your GitHub or GitLab account set up. Now you want to find the really interesting projects where you can contribute. And so hacktoberfest.com will have some projects highlighted, but you can also go directly to GitHub or GitLab and look for the Hacktoberfest topics. Then there are a few sites like Up for Grabs and goodfirstissues.com and goodfirstissue.dev that highlight and showcase projects that are great for getting started. The rules, again. So to get your digital badge and also your bragging rights at the end, you must make 4 pull requests to any public repository between October 1st and October 31st in any time zone. The PR must contain commits you've made yourself. This sounds obvious, but funny story. I once had multiple GitHub accounts. I had one for my business that I owned at the time, and I had one for my personal projects. And I was making PRs under one account and committing under another account and didn't realize that. And so I got to the end of October and was wondering where my prize was, and I didn't get a prize because there was no way to prove that all of the commits were from me. So be mindful, folks. Some values that carry us into Hacktoberfest. First of all, again, everyone is welcome. We want to make sure that anyone who's interested in diving in, or maybe you've been involved in open source and you want to kind of rekindle that interest in open source, everyone is welcome at every experience level across the globe. And then quantity is fun, but quality is key. And so you want to make sure that as you're participating in Hacktoberfest, which can bring you all kinds of personal and professional growth, you want to make sure that you're making meaningful contributions to open source software. And then another value, short-term action, long-term impact. Your participation has lasting impact on people and technology long after this month. And also, maybe stick around. Maybe you decide that open source is a cool way to contribute. You found some really interesting communities and communities that are really engaging, and you want to stick around. And so we hope that Hacktoberfest is kind of that gateway to open source for a lot of people. And so now how can you contribute? The basis for contributing to open source is pull request. That's kind of like the unit of contribution. So we'll talk a little bit about what open source is for those folks who are new to open source, and then we'll deep dive into pull request. So open source software is software that can be shared and modified because it is publicly accessible. And the source code is available for a modification or enhancement by anyone who can get access or can use something like GitHub, GitLab to access the software. And this is different to say a closed source or proprietary software where that source is not freely accessible or publicly accessible. And something I also want to remind folks of is open source is not necessarily free. It does not necessarily mean that this is free software. There are tons of profitable open source software companies out there. Why open source? So one of the best things about open source is that if you're looking to explore something, you're looking to learn something new, you can build a community around some of these new and emerging technologies. You can crowdsource finding solutions to really tough problems. The update frequency for open source tends to be a little bit higher because you've open sourced or because you've crowdsourced the solutions to these problems and these issues that you're publicly displaying. So you have a whole army of folks that can solve this versus a small team, let's say. And then you're going to see better maintenance. You're going to want to be mindful of dependencies and also coding best practices. And typically for really well-known open source projects, they will have wikis or readmes to help you understand kind of their coding best practices, their coding style guide, so that you can adhere to that and learn from them. There are several ways that getting involved in open source helps new developers. The first way is mentoring. This is free mentoring in exchange for your time and your effort. You get as much out of it as you put into it. And it's a huge opportunity to learn from some of the experts in the industry. We'll talk a little bit about that later in this presentation. And then you can choose your experience level. Like you can choose your own adventure. You can either deep dive or just kind of dip your toes in. For new developers, you can build a collection of open source projects to showcase your skills. And then there's building community around this. A lot of folks, as they're learning, it really helps to have folks around them to hold them accountable, but also to bounce ideas around with. And this creates a really good environment to learn and build better and faster with a trusted community. There are several ways to contribute. You can write documentation. You can groom the issue log. You can pick up some of the easy tasks. We mentioned those good first issues from before, or you can fix a failing build. And what this means is you don't have to be an expert in that technology or that project or even an expert engineer to be able to contribute to these projects. And so I mentioned earlier that pull requests are kind of the unit of contribution to a lot of open source projects. They are the preferred way to contribute any code to an open source project. And think of it this way. Think of it as requesting a project owner to include the code that you've written. You're asking them to pull in your code, which is hence the name pull request. And think of this more as a discussion and conversation rather than one transaction. You're really going to be creating an opportunity to talk about deeply what you're adding to the code base, how it's going to help, and how it should be added for sustainability. And so the first thing you want to be doing before you even start to open a pull request is discovering the kinds of projects that you'd be interested in, discovering the kinds of issues you want to contribute to, the kinds of ways that you want to contribute. You want to discover all the possibilities, right? There are several ways within GitHub and GitLab to start projects that you're interested in. And so you can keep this collection of projects and also issues that you might want to contribute to later. Once you found a good project that has the kinds of issues you feel comfortable contributing to, then you want to fork that project. And both GitHub and GitLab have ways that you can do this within their website. But also, if you are a command line person like me, then you can connect your command line or your IDE of choice to either GitHub or GitLab and do the forking at the command line. Once you forked, then you want to create something like a feature branch so that you can isolate what you're working on from the main branch of code within that fork. Once you have your own branch and you have switched to that in your IDE, you are welcome to edit as much as possible or as much as needed in your IDE of choice. I use VS Code a lot. I use Android Studio a lot, and both have ways to really deeply integrate with Git and with GitHub and GitLab. After you have gone through your editing process, then you want to review. You want to go through this with a really fine-tooth kind of view of what you're doing. And this is also a good time to get your friends involved. So this is a good time to pair and to get other eyes on this and to kind of code as a group. Once you feel good about the code that you are asking your maintainers to pull in, then you would submit your pull request. After you submit the pull request, now the maintainers can see your code. They can see where it's going to fit in. They can maybe even do some tests. There's probably going to be some conversation. They may ask, have you thought about doing it this way? Or, if you do it here instead of where you have it, then this is something that other parts of the application will have access to. So this is where that discussion, that conversation that I mentioned comes into play, where you can, again, learn from these folks, learn from, anything from coding style, best practices to, how you solve some pretty gnarly challenges from this process. This is where you can, grow as an engineer, but where you can also find mentors and where you can meet others in the community. And so after that process, you're going to have the point where they actually pull your code in, and now your code is there for everyone to be able to use. And so I want to leave folks with a few resources to get them going. And first, obviously, Hacktoberfest.com has a wealth of resources. First Timers Only is a really good place for folks who are new to open source. OpenSauced.com is great for folks who want to learn more and dig more deeply into open source. And then All Things Open, very much like OpenSauced.com, is more of a community for open source contributors and maintainers. And they also have a annual conference that is the largest event on the East Coast for open source. Want to give you a heads up that we will have some open source Q&A and chats with some prominent open source contributors and maintainers. We'll be talking a little bit later today on the day of the Hacktoberfest kickoff with Chris DeMars, who is a senior developer advocate too at DigitalOcean. He'll tell us a little bit about kind of his background in open source, but also from the perspective of DigitalOcean. Why is this so important that they create this space for the open source community? And then we'll be having a conversation with Brandon Roberts, who is an AI engineer, OpenSauced, but also an NGRX maintainer and creator of Analog.js. So be on the lookout for those videos coming later today. There are a few Hacktoberfest related and open source events I wanted to make folks aware of. So if you're in the Atlanta area, Refactor will be holding a few code jams for folks to, grab some food and code with friends, right? This is great when you need some pairing time when you are looking for different projects, and maybe this person, contributes to open source on a regular basis, and maybe they have some great ideas for you. So this is a great place to code together as we work on our Hacktoberfest pull request. Then on the 27th, All Things Open starts, and that's going from the 27th through the 29th. and you can catch your friendly neighborhood refactor organizers there. We're going to be there meeting with a lot of folks. I'm really excited to be there. So come join if you can. And then on the 31st, because we know that quite a few of you are last minute folks, we'll have our final countdown, which will be virtual. So on the final day of Hacktoberfest, join us in our Discord as we work together to finish up our pull and merge request. Thank you so much for listening. You can catch us on the web at our site, refactor.tech. You can catch us with our socials at linktree/refactor.tech, or you can catch us on our Discord and join the conversation with our bit.ly link here for our Refactor Discord. And if you have deeper questions around Hacktoberfest or you've run into some issues, feel free to reach out to the folks at DigitalOcean at support@hacktoberfest.com. Thank you so much.